Time now for Media Watch. We bring in James Creedon, as ever, primed and ready to go. European sanctions, James, against Russia, still one of the big topics in the media.
That's right. A lot of debate and a lot of discussion across the media about resistance to impose strong sanctions on Russia, in particular EU resistance because of energy dependence, in particular in Germany, very dependent on Russian oil, Russian gas in particular, seeing as they're scaling back on nuclear. So let's take a look at just some of how that is playing out in the media. European rifts emerge over sanctions for Russia. And all of this dithering, of course, faced with Russian certainty, whatever the costs, is making Europe look weak. I mean, that's just unfortunately how it's being depicted in the media. Why Europe can't hit Russia with its biggest club, energy sanctions. And that is German construction work on a Russian pipeline. And this in the right-leaning French daily Le Figaro, Mistral Russe. These are these French-built boats, naval vessels for Russia, one of which is to be delivered later this year, another next year, and now a degree of uncertainty over that. But Laurent Fabius still hasn't come down with a degree of certainty as regards that decision. He hasn't said we're not going to deliver them because there's jobs at risk. If they stop construction of those vessels, 1,000 jobs are at risk. Also, what do they do with them? You know, the French Navy could maybe take on one extra naval vessel. Right now they have 3 aircraft carriers. It's aircraft carriers, of course. The French Navy currently has 3. They would ideally like 4, but can they even afford to operate? So all these sorts of questions, which again makes Europe just look kind of dithering on this one. Now, this is a quote from John Kerry before actually the annexation of Ukraine, but it's the kind of thing you're finding on social media which depicts Western leaders as weak. We hope President Putin will recognise that none of what we're saying is meant as a threat. It's not meant in a personal way, all very conciliatory, except Vladimir Putin is kind of being certainly a lot more decisive in his words and actions. Take a look at this, because the satirical side of it, Mark, is, well, it's funny. It's meant to be, and I think it is. US freezes Putin's Netflix account. This is the Borovitz report on the New Yorker website. In what was described as a major ramping up of sanctions, Secretary of State John Kerry announced on Tuesday that the US had frozen Russian President Vladimir Putin's Netflix account, effective immediately, unless and until Mr. Putin calls off the annexation of Crimea. No more House of Cards or orange is the new black for him, Mr. Kerry said. So what they're trying to do there is basically, point out that these sanctions are pretty feeble compared to the ultimate potential, which I suppose would be military threats. The Onion, and we're glad it's not that, I suppose, but TheOnion.com, John Kerry poses as a masseuse to get a few minutes with Putin. That one is, I think, depicting Mr. Kerry as quite ridiculous. Having waited until the Russian leader was lying face down on the massage table before quietly slipping into the room, Secretary of State John Kerry is said to have posed as a masseuse at a high-end Moscow spa on Monday in order to spend a few minutes alone with Vladimir Putin, because he's being very tense, you see. That's the point. Tense. A lot of tension. So there you go. It's all... I suppose it's inevitable that it gets that sort of treatment.
Let's talk about the Russian media then, James.
Yes.
Maybe they're being a bit playful here, pointing to what they call an independence referendum in Venice.
That's right. And you see, the European media have been talking about this, but let's take a look at this headline from yesterday. Venice organises an online vote to become independent from Italy. Now, let's not over-dramatise it. This is something online. It's being organised by various parties in the north of Italy who have expressed secessionist points of view in the past. But it's not, as Russia Today calls it, an independence referendum in the EU, which is being completely unnoticed. In any case, just before we finish, Mark, seeing as all these noises of even secession in Venice, although I think we shouldn't exaggerate it too much, a lot of media looking at how borders have changed in Europe in the last 25 years. They're talking about Kosovo, they're talking about Yugoslavia, they're talking about Germany reuniting, etc. But Crimea, just a blip, according to this headline in The Independent, because this video has now been dug out of the archives. It got a lot of sharing on social media in the last couple of years, but never has it been more relevant. How many times European borders have changed in 1,000 years?
Wow.
Get a load of that. And as somebody mentioned yesterday when I was discussing this video, pretty much all of those changes in borders were accompanied by some sort of military action. So look what a completely violent and terrible history, really, on this continent for the last 1,000 years. A lot of it accompanied by military violence.
Indeed.
So
Makes you
nothing new
wonder-
in terms of what's happening.
Once you wonder what the word
in Crimea.
stability ever meant and why it was ever used about this region, really, don't you?
Absolutely.
James Creedon there, as ever, enlightening with Media Watch. Good to see you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mark.
very much indeed. We're taking a short break. After that, we bring you more news. This is Live from Paris.